Okay, I think I got this working. All right, hi, Dr. Bella DeCastro. It's Anwar Najmi. Today I'm going to be reviewing with you today my PowerPoint presentation entitled Growing Diversity of Faculty, Staff, and Students in Higher Education. Are we really ready for these changes? I'm going to get us started with kind of just talking about what diversity currently looks like for our institutions. As you will see on the screen, there is a really good graph from the ACE, American Council for Education. You can see there are a lot of changes that have been happening over the years, specifically as from this chart, you'll see from 1996 to 2015 to 2016. I also just kind of wanted to make a point that diversity currently just looks a lot differently. When we used to hear that term, when I used to hear it, it used to be just very kind of one-dimensional. You'd be talking about race or culture or gender maybe, but really diversity has taken on a whole different meaning, especially in the world of higher education, which includes different profiles, including race, gender, orientation of all kinds, socioeconomic status, global citizens, social justice initiatives, non-traditional students, research initiatives, administration, international students, and more. And as you can see here in just some of the categories, I know that this is not very all-inclusive of the difference in terms of race and ethnicity of what we see, but it's kind of sticking to like that general tone. Higher education institutions are typically at the forefront of change and acceptance, and these numbers alone are quite astonishing to see the changes that have happened over the years, especially in minority communities. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the rest of the presentation, but I just really want to draw attention to that because I thought it was really crazy to see that the increases that have changed over time. And I thought the most interesting one was that actually the white majority had decreased over time. It's one of the only categories that had decreased. So I thought that was interesting and worth noting. And as we know, higher education institutions are impacted by sociological, economical, political, technological advances in our world. And as our world continues to change and becomes more diverse, so do our college campuses. And that can include who we see, what we discuss, how we engage, and more. Here's some just more diversity statistics from the ACE Executive Summary that I thought were really interesting, specifically regarding field studies for different race and ethnicity groups, including, all racial and ethnic groups, ranging from American Indian, Alaska Native to international students, and everything in between. So as we can see, there really is a domination in some fields for certain different ethnicities, and I don't think in this presentation I'm going to be able to really understand why that exists, but I think it's interesting and maybe kind of assumptive on my side to think about, why are certain students of certain minorities, of certain cultures, of certain backgrounds gravitating towards certain fields? Is it cultural expectations? Is it preference? Is it based on the role models and the people that they have had in their life? All of these things I think are really important to note and really to pay attention to. So again, these are just some more diversity statistics. And then I want to talk about faculty diversity. I think that's a really important, highly discussed, but maybe not as discussed as I think and as crucial as to discuss. Because as you can see, in fall 2016 was only 5 years ago, barely. We're still talking about recent times. And as you can see, the professorate or just the faculty in general is still predominantly the white majority. And then as you can see, there is very, very sparse representation of other, minority groups. And one of the articles that I came across kind of discussed these paradigms of diversity faculty and staff in higher education. it made note to the 5 dimensions in faculty and staff diversity, including education, scholarships, community connections, climate and culture, representation, and voice. As we know, that's a big thing for our faculty community, is kind of like the presence and the service part of their position and the research that they have to offer. That's a really big component of their role. It was also faculty diversity. It was interesting the way that they explained it, is that faculty diversity in institutions, unless the institution itself has faced some kind of diversity issue in its history, diversity is really not a topic that's brought up a lot. It's just kind of like one of those things like, yeah, our faculty are predominantly white. Okay, it's kind of just like, let's just move along, let's keep going. So I thought it was just really interesting to bring attention to. And there's also just some stages of impact. So again, speaking to how an institution has been impacted by diversity, the 4 frameworks of diversity in educational organizations, and individualism, collectivism, and relational dynamics. It's basically just exploring and understanding verbal and non-verbal communications between that could arise in faculty settings, that could create intercultural conflict or misconceptions, and that's kind of just speaking to some of the paradigms that we see in the faculty world. It's not even just challenges that are brought up for students. It's also in the administration. As we can see here, sorry that the graph is kind of small, but I thought it was really cool to pay note to the higher administration. But as we can see, we still have a very big majority of, white individuals populating those seats seats at the table. Not that there's a wrong per se, but I just think that when I think of higher ed, I think of probably one of the most diverse systems that exist in our world in terms of, a workplace, organization, culture, and that type of thing. But when you think about who's at the top, who's making all those decisions, who is making decisions on behalf of the entire community, it's people that come from, primarily white backgrounds. And I don't really think that speaks to the diversity that we are truly seeing in our students, in our faculty. It's where's the voice, right? It's if you can't speak to the shared lived experiences of your faculty and of your students, are you really speaking to the community needs? Again, that's a bit of an overstatement, but just to kind of make my point is that I think that this is a challenge seen not just at the student level, but also faculty, administration, etc. Some of the articles that I read that talked about some of the other challenges that we see is that, especially for our students, first generation students, second generation students, they kind of get, especially from those from, minority backgrounds, they kind of have a different impression of college. Sometimes they have lack of role models. They exhibit innate survival skills in college, so it's kind of more just, it's not about engaging in the full experience. It's let me just get in and out to do what I need to do, especially when it comes to that socialization component. It's kind of really hard to diversify, students if everybody's sticking together and sticking to what they know. They even talked about it from a very micro level of how students even date around in college. It's if all the Asian kids only date Asian kids, the Black kids only date Black kids, it's we're really not expanding our reach as much as we possibly, as much as we could. And obviously, that comes down to personal prerogative, but I thought it was interesting to, highlight. So some recommendations and solutions, one of the articles that I did read was kind of talking about this business resource center and developing a sense of belonging for students. So again, building up that collaboration and that engagement in the community, not just staying within your community. And this can be done in a lot of different ways. This could just be done in a classroom setting, forcing people from all different walks of life, not just let's just say a professor says, all right, get into groups and do this assignment. Not letting people, stick to their friends or stick to who they know. It's assigning people at random diversifying who people are around, diversifying the thoughts. And then in terms of faculty representation, one of the articles I read really drew attention to the diversity in the faculty and tenor and in the higher education space. And I thought it was really interesting that they brought up to this point of mentorship for faculty, especially for faculty for people of color, of minorities. You know, I never really would have thought about that from a recruitment standpoint. I really thought it was like whoever is interested in getting in academia will become in academia. But I think it's that lack of fostering that relationship and engagement. It's like if we get more people excited about getting into academia, providing mentorship, providing opportunities for them to, you know, bring what they have to the academic world, you know, I feel like that just needs to be encouraged. So that can be encouraged through mentorship opportunities. And then they also really talked about informing minority faculty of the organization's culture. So I thought that was a really interesting way. It was like basically saying minority faculty members are going to care more about an institution's culture versus just, you know, the generic salary and research allocations. They're going to really care about like the students in the community. So I thought that was interesting. You know, just some more recommendations. You know, when we focus on recruitment and retention, we can diversify what we've been doing and meeting the changing demands. In 2021, I mean, come on, there's like too much out there for us to sit on what we know, right? It's time to stretch. It's time to expand our reach and really diversify the programs and services offered. One of the articles that I read was speaking to how this can be done in certain spaces, including like counseling centers. And this article specifically spoke to counseling for Arab American students. You know, kind of leading with the assumption that all Arab American students are going to have similar experiences. It's like we need to forego these assumptions. It's counterproductive to the therapeutic process. We need to treat everyone as individuals, no matter what you physically see, no matter what the color of their skin, no matter what they wear, etc. Everyone needs to be treated individually. And, you know, diversifying the topics, our classroom discussion, project assignments, etc. Those are all just little ways that we can increase diversity and visibility on our campuses, both inside of the classroom and you know, extracurricularly. And, you know, and ultimately, our communities deserve to feel seen, heard, and represented. And ultimately, that's what everyone is striving for. Everybody is striving to not only have a voice, but to have a seat at the table in many different capacities. For students, it could be student government, clubs and organizations. It could be faculty and staff, could be a, you know, staff committee, you know, whether that's done through HR or union, etc. And then for the administration, you know, that's pretty straightforward at the administration level. So here are my references, and thank you. I hope that this was, you know, informative and a pretty good step into the direction of dissertation land. You know, I do think I have some specifics. I do have some things to iron out, but I do think that this is the way that I definitely am heading. So thank you.